topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hello, everyone. This is Ira Wolf, back with my co-host Keith Campagna. For another episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. We are going to have Lee Andrese join us today. We're going to be talking about the title of our topic is empathy inevitable? Is empathy fatigue inevitable? We'll get that whole thing out. And part of that conversation was, you might remember if you've been following me, I've interviewed Lee a few times. I had her on a StreamYard live just a few months ago, and we were talking about recruitment, and she was on a panel that I had. She's pretty active on LinkedIn. She just started her new company, but I was on a roundtable with her about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. And she had this impassionate message about basically walking the talk. And the conversation was all about putting on or doing the right thing with diversity and inclusion and equity. And we've had, numerous conversations about that. And it was so passionate, I asked her to kind of come on to the show. And we're going to continue that conversation. And this morning, I was looking at a number of things, and I'm not going to bring those up right now, but there's a couple headlines that were in the news this morning. And we're going to have I'll guarantee you, it'll be a passionate conversation about where the heads of CEOs are and some of the initiatives that they're taking. And that'll be a great talk. And then just prior to the show, thanks to Keith, I had invited him. Apparently, Keith, you hold a kind of a bigger influence than I with Torrin Ellis. Yeah, and he just scheduled for middle of November, I think, whatever the third week in November was. So that'll be great. And we've got a couple other speakers coming up over the next few weeks about diversity and equity and inclusion, and the broader sense of that, social justice, and even a bigger sense than that of companies doing things right, really doing things not for their shareholders, but for their stakeholders, and recognizing that they are part of that. And that's actually a message coming out from the Business Roundtable. It's an organization that's represented by some of the best companies in the world, and 181 CEOs signed on that their focus will be based on shareholders, which includes even community, customers, vendors, suppliers, and made a commitment that they're in for profit, but they're broader sense. Keith, looks like you're chomping at the bit here.
I am. It's just fascinating to think about the capabilities, the what if scenarios, right, bud? And the hardcore truth that you almost can't ignore, right? The facts of the matter is business is going to figure out a way to keep doing business. And that doesn't necessarily mean that employees are going to be the ones that benefit the most from it. What I find interesting.
They benefit the most from it. The employees. The employees.
Right.
Benefit, a great deal.
I'm, it's funny to me thinking about how we usually reflect about Americans having a short-term memory. Before COVID came, we were talking about how valuable an employee is to an organization. And it was just last night I was listening. I can't think of his last name, but what's the futurist? Gerd?
Oh, Gerd Leonhard. Yeah, one of my favorites. Yeah.
He's actually thinking it was 30 minutes of the next 5 years. And he was talking about there being a complete paradigm shift towards moving money into businesses and their own stock exchange index, who are moving towards these people-driven type statistics that help, really embrace long-term growth within organizations versus the greedy grab.
Yeah, they've talked about that for a while. I mean, I haven't heard that they put it in an index. I've heard about it being part of how companies were valued, which we've talked about before, being literally put on the balance sheets and being reported. A lot of the numbers, they get buried in HR. The HR doesn't even track half these numbers, but, even things like turnover and engagement, literally becoming KPIs and metrics that are reported in financial statements.
And now you're thinking about now let's get to why Lee's going to be such a great guest today, because now we're going to talk about where the rubber meets the road. We've gone through a pandemic as a globe, as a country, as companies. Now the leadership, the very people that we've been talking about with utter questionable at best integrity, what are they going to do? Do they know what to do? Odds are they don't. If they don't, who are they going to talk to? I really think it's great to have Lee on to talk about it.
Yeah, we will. Right before we get to Lee, we want to thank our sponsors. I'll get them in a little bit. Bless you. We hear this from our sponsors, Zor.ai and also Success Performance Solutions. So you hear from them a little bit later in the show, but we do want to thank them for being part of that. If you're interested in being a sponsor, certainly give Keith or myself connect with us on LinkedIn, or you go up to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization website. We got some new opportunities, especially now that we're doing our new live show, our video, our live streaming as well. So we're basically radio and TV.
Yeah. And if you're listening, just know that I'm not saying it because we have a podcast, but I am saying it because we have a podcast. Podcast is starting to capture the attention of your audiences. It's not a matter of does it work? It's a matter of how soon can companies become part of it. I've been reading a lot about it, and in the interest in the category of the future of work, contact Ira or me if you want to talk about sponsorships, because we got a lot going here at the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few things going on. You can check out the website, Success Performance Solutions, just so I don't forget this. On Friday, and I just did a series with him, Ed Gordon, a friend of mine, colleague. He's had the Gordon Report. He's written 20 books on workforce, labor trends, workforce trends, future. His last book and is up to in a second edition of the same book was Future Jobs. Talked a lot about skills, and most of what he talked about has come true. And he's actually preparing a new white paper, but he has a quarterly, it's a periodic, but it was almost quarterly newsletter. And he asked me, because of the response we got when we did our live streams, he asked me if we could do those live. So on Friday at noon, he's releasing his newest Gordon Report. That's what it's called. You get to it by going either to my Facebook page or YouTube page. It's live on there. Or just connect with me, follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. You're surely going to see it there, how to view that. And if you miss it, it will be on my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Ira Wolf. So don't miss that. And then next week, we're doing on Crowdcast, we're doing a streaming with Scott McKenzie, who was the guest on Geeks Geezers and Googlization maybe a year ago. So it lost complete track of time. So forgive me for that. Could have been 6 months, could have been 2 years ago. But we had Scott on, if you remember, and we were talking about the future of e-learning exploded over the last few months. And so we're going to be doing an update next Tuesday. I believe that's at 3:00. That's free. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, online e-learning, micro-learning. So, but now we have got Lee Andrese. Lee has started a new company. I'm going to butcher this name, I'm sure. Akathame. I hope that was close, but we'll have her correct it. We'll explain the origin of that. And Lee has been I actually met Lee through another one of our guests and colleagues, Debbie Levitt. And you've heard me talk a lot about her, especially with the Four Horsemen of Bad CX and the kind of experience. She's the origin of the FCDD, which sort of took off. It became my most popular, conversation. Frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction. Hang on, I don't know. Just want to make sure. Oh, okay, just want to make sure that Lee was coming on board here. And I just got a blip on my screen here. It was something else. But Lee is basically doing a lot with UX. So she was understanding the branding and the presentation and really took a dive into the user experience. And so I invited her on, and again, because of her impassioned message just a few weeks ago on the JobSync Roundtable about diversity and especially what CEOs need to do. So let's
bring her on.
There she is. So welcome to Geeks Geezers and Googlization.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Good. So how badly did I butcher your company name?
You did great. It's akathame, and you did great.
Okay, thanks. And what? Just have an explanation. Maybe this will be the connecting point. And I'm sure you told me this before, but I only have so many active brain cells anymore, and it's pretty crowded up there. What's the origin of it?
It's a made-up name. I took 2 words. I am actually a holistic practitioner as well, on top of other things. So I took 2 words. The first is akasha, which is energy from above, and athame, which is a tool used to direct energy. So it is really about directing energy. And so as long as you're focused, you can accomplish anything. And so akathame is all about getting focused.
Oh, this is going to be a good one, Lee. This is going to be a good one.
You look at that smile on Keith's face. So I also noticed, I was going back through something I didn't know about you. We've only known each other for less than a year, I think. Somewhere down there through Debbie, I think how we met. And I saw that you were a truck driver.
Mm-hmm. I still have a class now.
Nice.
Amazing journey.
So
that may beat the dentist part in me. So,
Lee, I'm gonna jump in. What does a energy focusing, energy driving, talent acquisition, knows when to be funny, knows when not to be funny woman doing on the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show?
Ira asked me. When Ira asks me to do something, I just do it.
Nice. What is this event? I missed it. I missed the event. What is it that you said that got us talking the talk and now trying to figure out how we could get people to walk the walk?
So I think it was on that panel that we attended, Ira, where I spoke up and I have this tendency of twitching when I hear buzzwords used over and over and over again, without anything to back them up, without any data to say, yes, that's actually being worked at in the office, and we see that happening. And they use the word empathy, and that just flipped the switch. Yeah. And so I got a hold of the mic, and I don't think I got off that mic, Ira, until I was getting ready to.
and he had a phenomenal response. Just to give everybody background, I don't remember the exact title, but it's all about recruitment, and it was about how do you create a better brand, how do you attract the right people. And the two, it was Janine Dennis who was on there, and I've got a quote from her which was fascinating. And her last name was Shelley, I think. Do you remember who the other?
I remember.
Yeah, but it was a great conversation. But one of the things that struck me, let me see if I can find this quote. Got like a billion screens open here. It was Janine Dennis, by the way, just to give her credit. She's Chief Innovations Officer at Talent Think Innovation. Super smart. She said that, and she was, we were talking about, I guess, especially when it comes to diversity and people tracking numbers. And her comment was that the number of Black people in this country, U.S., have been 13% for as long as anybody can remember. And then she asked, how is that possible if allegedly blacks procreate at rates higher than the whites?
That's a provocative question.
Yeah.
But it's not true.
And it's crazy. It is. I mean, it's something you never think about. And there's a problem when we talk about diversity and all those numbers. It's like, okay, we met our quota. Look, we have 20, and I'm going to give you a story. This morning, I was pulling down some story headlines to kind of spin this conversation out. And it was like, it's consistently 13%. And the reality is then you hear that the other alleged or myth that, well, blacks just, they have 9 kids. Well, how's that possible?
Right.
That percentage, and white and the population, the procreation rate of whites is like 1.2. So it's sort of like the pandemic statistics. What do we believe? Lee.
Yeah. So I think we believe what we want to believe, Ira, honestly. And I think that this is where biases and how we were raised and all of that stuff that you can't see behind the eyes that goes into individual perceptions and decisions and how they make those decisions in the workplace. So if you choose to believe that there are only 13% of Black people in the United States of America, I'm not going to try to change your mind. However, if you advertise that you are a diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization, and I don't see the actual physical evidence of that to be true, you can guarantee that you and I are going to be having a conversation if you want me to help fill seats within your organization.
Right. And that's where the walk the walk, talk the talk comes from, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely.
What's behind that? You went from being we were having a little bit of tongue in cheek, and now you got all serious. So what's driving that passion?
So I think the pandemic, what really frustrates me, Keith, is that, first of all, we have, as a nation, forgotten all of our history. In this past year, we have forgotten, let's just say in the past few years, we've forgotten our history. We have become a collective group of selfish human beings that have absolutely no idea what living tough is really like. I have been very fortunate to be raised by a 91-year-old woman. She'll be 91 in November. And she remembers what it was like to live through the Depression and through 2 world wars. And she looks at me and says, "You think this is tough? You think that having to ask people to wear a mask is tough? Right. You think that having to ask people to work in healthy environments and recognizing time off and having vacation, blah, 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 you think that's tough? Try working where your grandmother worked. Try living through that." And so the sense and dose of humility that I get on a regular basis reminds me that, what true humility is and what true empathy is. And so when I have clients tell me that they want to put a crew of people out on the streets during the height of a pandemic to do whatever work they need them to do, what are you, crazy? That's not empathy. That's telling me that you're putting profits above everything else. And you're not giving them the right equipment to be safe, let alone to keep others safe. So I challenge that. So when I meet with clients or when I meet with candidates, especially at the executive level, when I'm screening them for senior level positions, I'll say, tell me, give me examples of how you lead with empathy.
Yeah.
And very often it's a BS story.
So can you, and I know I had a pretty in-depth conversation with Debbie Levitt and you. We talked about this in the past, and Keith and I have kind of scratched the surface on empathy. We've had many people on the show that talked about it, but the definitions seem to be all over the place. What it means. People throw it around, as you said, as a buzzword. Which is somewhere where the fatigue is going to set in. How do you define empathy?
Empathy is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, period, and make a decision from their shoes, not from your shoes. That's all it is. That's all it is. If you want to get teary-eyed about it, if you see somebody watching a movie and they're crying without any reason for them to cry because the people on the TV screen are crying, that's somebody who shows empathy for being in that person's role, whether it's acting or whether it's real. That is an empathetic person. But it doesn't mean that when other factors come into play, like economics, financial, personal, company, that they're going to have that same degree of empathy.
So one of the things that you said during the, I think you said that, or it was a confluence of a lot of information that was coming out, was about CEOs literally wanting, that, and it doesn't have to be a CEO, but from the senior suite, the owners, small business, they got to walk the talk, and not necessarily give a lot of lip service. So I saw these headlines this morning in preparation for this. I do try to do some homework. So this is like one bad mistake after the other. The Wells Fargo CEO. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
So just a smile. I say Wells Fargo CEO, and it's like,
I mean, do we have to go any further? Let's just.
Okay. So it says this week, or what his Charles Scharf is his name. He's angered Black employees at the lender by comments he made during a Zoom call, where he claimed the bank is struggling to reach diversity goals because there are not enough qualified minority talent.
Which language would you like me to respond in?
I think we're not allowed to use the F word. I think other than that,
we might have been taken off the air. I mean, one is, how many mistakes can you make and still be CEO? How does the one organization sustain this, because they're continually in trouble? But I mean, it sounds like tone deaf is a huge understatement. So.
I mean, that's not even empathy. Empathy doesn't even have a place there. That's capacity. That is common sense. I mean, and there's ignorance, right? Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he doesn't understand. Maybe he's never talked to the head of talent acquisitions in his organization, or the HR department isn't helping him understand how we can build that capability within his organization and grow that community.
So that brings up an interesting challenge, though. So you have that maybe he doesn't understand, but then is he even listening to HR? Maybe HR understands, or can they attract the right people to HR, because that's the culture that is set there. It really becomes that chicken or the egg.
And this was the point I was trying to make on that call that we had, Ira, is that HR needs to stand up and have that voice face to face, no in between, have that voice to the CEO and say, this is the mud that you are creating, and either you are going to be able to clear this up or you're not, because it will affect your top and your bottom line.
Okay, so I want to, looking at the time here, Lee, and knowing we're going to probably take a break sooner or later, we'll think about this maybe as a go-to to the back half of the podcast. But I want to push back on you here. For months and years following up before COVID, Ira and I and our guests would talk about how HR might not be the most properly prepared to handle the amount of change that's required to lead a company in the future of work, and where it might go only maybe 18 months to a year ago. And then what we saw because of COVID, the value of HR has now gone through the roof. And we're stuck looking at a bunch of maybe unprepared HR people and leaders who have never once considered what might happen if they were truly exposed and they actually needed people over profit. Where do you start to unbundle that so you can help an organization that might be lacking in both HR and executive direction? Or is that not really the case?
No, we need to step up the game. HR needs to become far more business savvy than they have been. They've always been the internal resource that says, just prevent us from going to court. We want to minimize our human relations, legal issues, keep us compliant. That has been their whole thing. Then they've got this payroll thing, and then they've got the benefits thing, and then of course they've got this talent acquisition thing. So where is your business impact? So when I hire, when I recruit HR people, the first question I ask is, what type of business impact have you made on your organization? Silence.
I'm so glad we have videos because you're actually catching exactly what I think. Yeah, I have a software company that actually quantifies value, and the first project I ever did was something called HROI, because there's no such thing as a value in HR. It's all admin.
Well, they give you an ROI. Do you know how they give it to me? There's only one person on that team that's usually giving it to me. It's whoever's in charge of human relations. They say, well, we prevented $500,000 in lawsuits this year, or we prevented X amount of cases from going to court. I said, and?
Right. But that just, to me, that demonstrates the idea that you don't know what you don't know. If you're not awoke, how can you realize you're in a dream, right? So where does it come? And Ira, you tell me, maybe we come back to this, but where does a company start? Because you want to believe there's some sort of manager or vice president, or heck, even a C-level that wants to take the bull by the horns and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we take the existing CHROs and we evaluate and assess. Do they have the ability to understand business beyond the HR realm? And if they do, get them off into an executive level program that can quickly get them ramped up and understanding how the top and the bottom line work and everything that goes on in between. Yeah. So until that happens, I think it's going to be a real struggle.
And we are going to take a break, but there was a great question that just came in. So this is one of the other questions we'll address when we come back, is why pass the buck to HR? So, okay. However, you are listening to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. I'm Ira Wolf with Keith Campagna, and our guest today is Lee Andrese. We're tackling a very provocative subject. We started about empathy, but we've dove in, which I knew we would. We're really talking about what's it going to take to really make a change and not create fatigue from that. One more challenge of 2020, but now is the time, or there's no looking back. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks Geezers and Googlization show. I'm Robert Wolf with Keith Campagna, my co-host, and Lee Andrese. We are talking about empathy, diversity, inclusion, equity, fairness, CEOs, incompetence, and competence. Hopefully, we'll get to the competence part, how to have that. There were a couple of questions we had when we left off. One was, we'll tackle that in just a minute, let me just read it, why pass the buck to HR? But again, looking through some of the other headlines that I saw, Target pledges, going back to the numbers, we were talking about that 13%. So Target could hang on, I can see them celebrating this. They're going to increase the number of Black employees by 20%. So good initiative by numbers. They have 360,000 employers, so obviously that it has a huge impact, and I give credit. At least they're trying to make that initiative. So 25% of their employees are Latino, 15% are Black, so they're even above that. 5% are Asian, 5% identified as mixed race. So sounds like they're doing a good job. They met all the EEO categories and groups, right? Yeah. Here's the challenge. Only 5% of the executives or senior level officials are Black. Okay. So it's, and again, you want to give people, you want to give companies and organizations credit where credit's due. So they're doing much better than everyone else, and they meet the diversity guidelines. They exceed the diversity guidelines, and so let's give them a round of applause. But as I did a webcast a few weeks ago with Dr. Solange Shara, who has the company HC Moneyball. And on that, she's taken the data, and we've had Victor Assad on a week ago, and we're talking about data literacy. And on the call, we were talking about being able to quantify equity. So we can quantify the numbers that we meet the criteria, but then we need to look at things like the velocity of progression, the opportunities that are given.
Right.
And I just submitted an article for October, for my October article for Cornerstone On Demand's rework. And it was all about that. And one of the things I came up with is, are you giving a step stool or an escalator to all the genders, all the ethnic groups, all the whites? Do you give the escalator to the white male and everybody else gets a step stool to advance? And that's sort of what you start reading between the lines. And that's really where the rubber is going to hit the road, when people start quantifying data, when they start quantifying not just do you have the right colors and genders represented in your picture, but does everybody have the same opportunity for advancement? And not just say, oh, we give everybody the opportunity for training. But what happens after the training? What happens after they complete it? How many people, these are things that we started to ask these questions. How many minorities, how many females, how many Blacks, how many Asians leave the organization because they're not promoted, because they don't have a chance, where other people get promoted in 6 months? It takes 3 or 4 years for a minority to get promoted.
So we're touching on so many topics during this call. So many things.
I'm just throwing out to say the picture is much bigger than saying, hey, we're hiring 20% more Black. What more could we do?
So I think where this all connects with empathy is understanding the customers that you support, understanding the people who stand up your organization, who represent your brand as part of your organization or customers. Does your organization represent that? Does your organization represent the consumers of your product or service? Does your organization represent the community that you live in? Does your organization represent the culture of your nation? Of the world? Like, who do you want that brand to represent physically out in the marketplace?
Right.
And so
let me ask you that. So if you're in white suburbia, or you're in some of the red states, and you say, look, it reflects our composition reflects our community.
Then if that's what you want, then that's what you want. If that's your brand and if that's what you want to represent, then I, as a consumer, will more than likely not buy your product, because that is not the type of company. And I have the power. My wallet has the power of whether or not a company will succeed. And all those friends of mine who have the same wallet, I will influence their purchase as well. So that's up to you. That's up to the CEO.
So I don't know if you said this or I pulled this from another quote or somebody else said it during that roundtable, but basically it said that you basically walk up, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier about HR going, holding their own and being the voice. It says, you are not teachable. You're not able to be educated to this when it comes to fairness. So at this point is either you change or I leave. Was that, did you say that, or was that from something else, or did you wish you said that?
It could have been.
Something I would say because I'm a former high school teacher too. I mean, that's my real trade as a high school teacher. Right. So you are not teachable, then I'm not going to waste my time. Don't even have those conversations. I do want to talk about what I think is happening with empathy in this pandemic. I think that every company's website, when you go to it, oh, my heartfelt sympathies to everybody who's struggling in getting through today's time. You cannot touch a website without the first banner being during times like this. Well, let me tell you something. This pandemic is going to be like giving birth to a child. We are going to get through these months of giving a child, and then we're going to forget all about this pain. I know we are. And then we're going to go back to those ways. How do I know this? Because job postings are coming out that says during this struggling time of a pandemic, you're going to be able to work remotely. But once this is all lifted, we want you back in the office. We want you commuting 1 to 2 hours a day. We want you to make sure that right. We want to make sure that we see that you are working every step of the way. That's not empathy. No. That's a band-aid.
So let me go back to the other example, and I've often said this before: is people spend all their time planning the wedding and not their marriage. People plan the pregnancy, but not the growing up part. So taking your analogy one step further is that the child, when the pandemic, it's never going away. I mean, the pandemic will go away, but we'll always have we'll always have coronavirus or another one. What happens when the child's born? I mean, so it comes out of the womb, we come out of this pandemic, we've got this child, but it's going to evolve, it's going to grow, and we have all these needs. So, I guess the period of time we can say, oh, that's behind us now we're back to normal. But now we've got this growing toddler that's going to grow up and mess things up for a while.
Right. So now you're talking about training, development, coaching, mentoring, and all that. I think what's going to happen, one of two things is going to happen. Either the people starting to, I really want to go back to that question about HR. Let me just tell you the number one role of HR is to represent the people, the human beings of that organization. You are the voice. As the leader of human resources, you are their voice. You have a responsibility to keep that organization sound and safe for the people that work there. That is number one. You also have an obligation because the company is paying you to make sure that that company is kept out of jail, that we're doing the right things to keep them legal, but there's also moral and ethical behaviors that human resources needs to take a stand. You lead as a leader in that space, you lead human beings first and foremost. And I'll tell you one company that did a great job until it stopped doing a great job, which was Eastman Kodak. If you look at where Eastman Kodak was back in the day, this company never had a union because they made it a culture that says we're going to pay our people very, very well. We're going to make sure that they work in a safe environment, and we're going to keep it that way until the 70s hit. And then the arrogance, same thing with Bethlehem Steel, although I think they had a union. But if you look at these business cases, these businesses that are no longer, and look what happened to them, they didn't change, Ira. They didn't change. If a pandemic doesn't change how companies operate, what will?
Is there a company right now that you admire that thinks doing a great job?
All right, so then I get to ask the question.
This is the first. We silenced Lee.
Well, I think
so. There's another question here. This sort of fits in line with that HR question, is because HR is compliant, so they're meeting the EEO guidelines. I'm not getting you sued. We've done everything right. Blah blah blah. The question came in is why does it have to be by ethnicity, not by the ability to do the job?
Oh, now you're talking about inclusion. So there is a very, very wise woman, not to mention highly intelligent. She speaks before Congress about diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Bankers Association. And she said to me on one of my podcasts, she says, Lee, if we are inclusive, we will automatically be diverse. And so if we are not talking to people who are in wheelchairs right now, the people in wheelchairs who cannot drive into work every day, or people for whatever reason can't drive into work, are going, say, all of a sudden now everybody can work remotely. But before, when I asked to work remote, you said that wasn't a possibility. So now try stuffing that genie back in the bottle. That's empathy. Whether a company actually sticks to this, how they've accommodated their workforce to be able to work from home and now open up those opportunities to people who truly can't make it into an office, then we'll see if empathy hits the road.
Yeah, I love this quote. And again, I was just going through stories this morning. It's from the Dropbox CEO, Drew Houston. And he said, we've gone through a one-way door.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we'll see. I swear to God, that door's going to shut. I honestly believe that until companies are brought to their knees like they were now, this pandemic brought many companies to their knees.
Right. It's still going to bring companies to its knees. It's not over.
Overnight, they had to be able to flip that remote work button on, right? And so now what's going to happen when it turns around is the workforce. I think the workforce is going to be smart enough to be able to go to their organizations and say, if you want to work with me, this is how I work.
So I'm going to take that a step further and say that it will be the eventual progress of the market, which I think answers your question of if a pandemic doesn't change the way executives run a company, what will? I think the market will, because once, as far as I could tell, when we talk about things settling down, that means that markets reopen, which means we're going to come back to a place where the best available talent is going to want their own terms. They're going to want to be able to stay home. They're going to want to be able to work in a certain capacity with certain people. And I think that's what you were getting at, Lee. The idea of pretending that you can now, or as a corporation, can set the rules just like they were before COVID hit. I think you're out of place, and I think businesses that do that will find themselves in a very, very bad position within 5 years.
And I'm going to share with you one more saying that is the truest saying that could ever be written. Change you must, or die you will. I don't care if you're a person, place, or thing, or a massive organization. If Bethlehem Steel and Eastman Kodak haven't provided enough case studies for our generation to figure out that if we don't think differently about how we get our work done and who does that work, and open up our minds to all the possibilities, as they say in Italian, goodbye.
So Lee, I mean, we're just scratching the surface here, and hopefully we'll get you back on with other people. I think you heard we're going to have Torrin Ellis on, and we've got some real leaders in this, real passion leaders, and love to have you and as part to continue that. But I've got two questions to kind of wrap up the show. One was just asked to me yesterday. I thought it was a brilliant. I loved the question, and it caught me off guard almost as much as it did you when I asked you if was there a company that was setting a good example. But this one came in from an early listener. Is why was it tough? Why did you leave trucking? And was it tough as a woman in trucking?
Oh, yeah. It was very tough as a woman in trucking, but I actually wore a dress every single day. And I wrote a note to the president of the largest publication at that time, Over the Road and Pro Trucker. And I told him how awful their magazines were for recruiting female drivers. And then he offered me a position, and I wrote a column for 15 years called Driven Women that was produced 250,000 times every month. And so we slowly but surely got that. And the reason I got out of the truck is because I did it to go shopping across the country, really. But I did. I took 2 years off, and I had a blast. I went coast to coast and had a great time.
Leadership with intention. Every bit of your story, I'm loving.
And here's the other one. And you got to.
I also ride a horse. I ride a motorcycle. So anything that's got speed and thrill to it, I'm all about it.
You're in it. I love it.
I've got 60 seconds to answer this question. If you had to write a chapter of a book, just a chapter, what would it be? What's the title?
I would call it Driven Women.
I love it.
Perfect.
I love it.
How can people get a hold of you, Lee?
Well, they can reach out to me at lee@akathame.com. That's probably the best and fastest way, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to you.
Super. And she's always on LinkedIn and does always respond. So
thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, it was a great show, great conversation.
Thanks.
Keith, what do you think?
Passion, driven with it. I think that what we really did today was kind of circle the wagons around the things that are much deeper, right? Like the truth of the matter is that Lee is right in almost every capacity. The truth is that to fix all of that stuff requires an awful lot of work, and it requires a lot of people like you, like me, like Lee, that can help go from the outside and disrupt the way people think business needs to be done as a continuation of 2019, and think differently, because everything is going to be different.
Right. And there were so many other things. I mean, there were so many other headlines that I saw this today. Just came across American Airlines approves the BLM pins, the Black Lives Matter pins for staff. So, it's okay to wear that. So it comes down to, how does that fit into culture? Is that politicizing the whole event? I mean, is it improper because it's politicized, or is it improper, or do they make decisions because it's the right thing to do? And millions of conversations like that. And Torin will be
I begged them. Listen, I begged them to come on. It's been a year and a half. I begged the guy. At the end of the day, that's
where I did. Yeah. So
that's the man.
Fun. And I think that's just the start of the conversation. Hopefully we'll continue to have a lot more of these. Some news on our front. You can see it was just scrolling across the screen a few minutes ago. Next week, talking about, again, the upskilling, reskilling, doing that online. Grow your leader, develop or grow your talent and develop your leaders. It's free webinar for now. Scott McKenzie's we're going to get a future update on where e-learning is, and you'll actually be able to get a 15-day trial with it, and it actually now links to an assessment, leadership assessment. So a lot of good things on that front. What else? We've got to thank our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. Got an opportunity. Anybody wants to come on, be a sponsor, love to have you. Be able to get the word out to all our listeners. My book's still available. You can get to that by besthrbook.com. Get it for free. Unfortunately, it's taking a couple weeks for shipping to go out with the postal service these days, but you get a free copy of my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization.
My copy is Selling with Noble Purpose.
And we want to thank, from 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Thanks. Short video on that. Yeah. Glad you got a copy there, Keith. As well. One of the benefits of Geeks, Geezers and Googlization. Next week, we got an interesting show. We've had Rachel Robertson from Antarctica, from Australia. She was only the second female expedition leader. Antarctica had great leadership stories. Fascinating. Next week, we got a Navy SEAL.
Nice.
On board, talking about hiring talent. How to find talent. So fantastic. We are now, other big news, we are now on Amazon. Geeks, Geezers and Googlizations on Amazon Music. So you can go up and you can get it on Amazon. The replays, of course, YouTube now and Facebook, but Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, all those places, if you will. And final words, as we always say, until next week, Geeks, Geezers and Googlization show, 1 p.m. Eastern time. This is Ira Wolf and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.